Okay, so we're doing 3 hours of presentations today. They're not the same, an hour here, 2 hours on the main stage. I was going to do this in the reverse order, so you just have to kind of put up with me doing this by ear a little bit. So the first 35 minutes of this is an interview that I recorded with William Whitecrow in February of 2017, a year before he died. He died in February of this year. And before I did that interview with him, I did about 10 hours of private interviews with Andrew Bjago, that nobody's ever heard except me. They're recorded. And another 10 hours or so with William Whitecrow privately, same deal. And then I interviewed most of the other folks who are well known, who claim to have been on Mars in a similar situation. And then I cherry-picked what some of them shared with me and did follow-up interviews. So this is the follow-up interview with William Whitecrow at the end of that 10 hours with him. The reason I cherry-picked is because I had photographs of some of the things that they described for me in the interviews that no one has seen. In some cases they've seen it, like this, which you're about to see. But in most cases, no one's ever seen these photos. NASA doesn't know what it's got in its photos. There are so many that I'm convinced that NASA is quite clueless, really. And I think initially they tried to cover up stuff, and then they just gave up on it. They don't even know what's in their photos, which is a good thing, as you're going to find out today. So with William Whitecrow, I showed him things that I had based upon the interviews with him, and you're going to see his reactions to that and hear that in this first 35 minutes. After that, I'm going to show you that there is current life on Mars. Complex biological life. I'm going to give you proof of that. So we'll start with this. I'm just going to play it. This is posted on YouTube, by the way, recently. So you can go back and rewatch it later if you wish on my YouTube channel, which I'll give later. Obtain through Prophecy House. That's PROPHECYHOUSE.com. ProphecyHouse.com. That's my publisher. And my guest, William Whitecrow, who is a whistleblower in the secret space program arena, and who has testified of having been on Mars with Andrew Bjago, Brett Stillings, William Stillings, and others. And the purpose of the interview today is to begin to make it known to the world that in fact there is hard evidence that some individuals such as William have in fact been on Mars, and that Mars has complex biological life both from the past and the present, roaming its surface and under its surface. And so I don't know if I can, but I'll see if I'm able to do that. It may be as loud as it goes. They may have to adjust their system. Maybe I'm wrong, okay? Maybe you're going to be complaining too loud. Be careful what you ask for, right? Okay. All right, so I'm just going to let it pick up where it was. Now this sounds pretty strange to a lot of you folks. Okay.
Well, that works.
You're listening to this for the first time, but you're going to see some pretty incredible photos that are just the tip of the iceberg of what I offer in these books that are now available through Prophecy House, now as in by the time you actually watch and hear this. And these photos are going to simply blow your mind. So William, I began a few months ago by introducing myself to you through Andrew Bjago, and I'd spoken at length with Andy before that, and then we did about 10 hours of interviews, you and I. And in those interviews, you hadn't heard about any of the stuff that we're about to look at today. You hadn't heard anything about me before we had pretty much completed those interviews. So you didn't know what it is that I was trying to accomplish, nor what it is that I would present to you. And in those interviews, I had you describe for me creatures that you encountered on Mars in as much detail as you could recall. And I had you describe for me weapons that you used on Mars. And one of those was a device that Andrew Bjago has referred to as a flash gun. And you called it alternately a pulse pistol in our interview. And I had you describe that for me in detail. And after that, toward the end of our 10 hours of interviews, I asked you to look up a photo on the internet, to just Google Mars handgun. And then you came up with a photo like this one that we're looking at here now on the screen. And so folks, I'm just going to point out by moving the mouse cursor around this, where you see the mouse rotating, this is something that looks like a pistol of sorts that was photographed by one of NASA's rovers on the surface of Mars. And I had William Whitecrow pull this up. So I'm circling it. Now I'm going to go to a larger version. That's the same thing right there. I'm flipping back and forth between the photos. So here's the enlarged photo. And this is not cleaned up in any way. You're looking at the raw photo. It hasn't been touched up in the slightest, no adjustments at all. This is as NASA presented it. And again, this is the same thing that we see right here in the background. So you can see rocks, or what appear to be rocks, all around it. And this is obviously grossly different in appearance. So we've got 3 different photos that NASA took of this, all from the same distance roughly. 2 of the 3 are better quality than the last one there. So this is the first one. So William, could you please describe for me your impression and your reaction when you first saw this?
Well, when you first told me about this, first we did the interview, and you really got in detail, you had me describe everything to a T, and then after that, you contacted me and told me, I want you to look at something. When you gave me the photo and I looked it up, it took me less than a minute to call you back, after I viewed the photo. This is one of the weapon systems that we had on Mars. There's no doubt about that. What's really interesting is I felt like a little kid in a candy store here, because I'd never seen anything like this. I don't go looking at NASA photos or anything. Other people send stuff to me. But what was really interesting is your in-depth interview and asking me about this thing and the handle and the form of the barrels and how your power pack clips into it and everything like this. And then I seen it. It made my heart race. It was really fascinating to see this. And I called you immediately and told you this is one of the things that we use right here. It was just amazing that you were able to find something. This is a medium range weapon right here. The reason we call them pulse, Andy calls them flash. During my training, we were told that they were more of a pulse type weapon, which is the same thing as Andy was saying and everything, just a different description, terminology used. But in security, we're going to use different terminologies than other individuals. So I was blown away. And my wife was too, because I talked about things of this nature, and then all of a sudden we see a picture of it right here on Mars itself. I can't say how happy I was to see this, to be honest with you, because I didn't think I'd ever see anything like this, to be honest with you. I thought what was there in the programs I was in was just that they keep things so compartmentalized and so secret that you don't see this stuff anymore. When you pulled this up, it gave me a sigh of relief, to be honest with you. It really did.
Yeah, this is just a photo on the surface of Mars taken by a NASA rover.
Yeah, I was happy about that, but at the same time, it brought back a lot of memories, of other things that had taken place there with weapon systems and confrontations and things of this nature. So it helped a lot of the healing process, of coming out and telling people what I knew and what I've seen. And like you said, I've never heard of you before. I figured it was just another interview, and here it is. You start bringing out factual evidence that talked about what I talked about. So I can't say enough.
Can you tell us about what year you were on the surface of Mars, the period in which you were on the surface of Mars, and when you were there with Andy, and how you got there versus how he got there, just very briefly for some context for the audience? Because they're going to say, how did this guy get to Mars? We can't get there with a rocket. So just, give people some understanding briefly.
Yeah, very true. The first times that we went, you have different craft out there, TR-3B, TR-3, the MAT, things of this nature. Everything was done by anti-grav technology, basically reverse engineered technology, things of this nature. So that's how we got there at first. It was by craft, but not by rocket engines and things of this nature. The first early craft they had the anti-grav technology, but at the same time they had to have thrusters for entering atmospheres and things of this nature. It was a little bit different. I don't know the whole technology. That's their aspect. I was into the security aspect. So I had been picked to start training individuals as well here for the journey to Mars. When they got there, they would know what to expect, close quarters, because there's still some fairly dangerous aspects of Mars to be in there because of some of the creatures and everything. So I started training individuals. You know, that was my job early in the 70s, early 70s, 60s and stuff like this. I had experiences, which we won't go into at this time, but when I got into the military, that's when I started working with people in training. And that even continued on when we went to Vietnam and everything of this nature. But the time dilation things that they can do now is just amazing. So after a period of time, the technology had been reverse engineered. Some of the Tesla technologies, this is very important for people to understand. Tesla technology, with the help of other beings, I will say, and we would call them extraterrestrials or whatever, was able to take this technology and refine it down to teleportation, the time travel aspects, and the teleportation really came in big time, and it still is in use right now, between ships, between planets, things of that nature. So the last part, when I was working within the programs and everything, about midway on up, was when they started using teleportation technologies. We didn't have to use ships anymore, but we could only do a few at a time. Now the technology is where you can just run people through and have them go to wherever you want. At that time, you could only take a few through at a time. And from what I've heard from other people in the program now, that is way far beyond where we're at now.
So you went there initially by ship, and I know Andrew Bjago has said he never went by ship. He went by Mars Jump Room facility out of a couple of locations, one in El Segundo, California. He's described that several times in his various interviews and presentations. That's how he got there, and you acted as kind of a guard to Andy when he was there, him and Brett Stillings. And one of the things that you and Andrew have separately described in interviews to me and to others was that you had encountered pterodactyl-like creatures also on Mars and dive bombing you, against which you had to defend yourselves. And you just mentioned in this interview a couple minutes back that there were dangerous creatures on Mars. So I mentioned the pterodactyl. Could you describe for us another creature that you told me about in our interviews before? Again, I showed you or told you about anything that I have described, that you described to me, that I've now shown you a photo of a creature, and I'm going to show that here in our conversation for the audience. But tell us about that.
Well, basically, there was I called it a pig-type creature, you know, more of a ridgeback, you know, and those people that understand what a ridgeback is, you know, it is a pig and everything with a ridge of hair across the back and everything. And I've seen several where they're in herds and everything on Mars as well. And that is one of the creatures that when you showed a picture, I was another shocked again. You're the only one that's been able to do this to me so far. And there's a lot of them. They're very herd. There's taller ones, you know, bigger ones and shorter ones. The ones that I had talked about and everything really weren't more dangerous to us and everything. They had the ability, there's a lot of creatures that are under the surface of Mars and everything. And these are things that they can dig with their snout down and get and everything. And I give a pretty detailed example of that, along with several others, more of the, you know, the pterodactyl aspect, but also there was more that were more dinosaur looking, like Andrew had said, the plesiosaurus type situation. So there was quite a few different things there that we had talked about. But when you showed me the picture of the one individual, you know, that one with the write-off, and then where this creature is looking up and you can see its snout and its eyes and everything exactly as I described. It was just amazing to see the pictures after the fact, after you had interviewed me, and I'd never seen anything like that. And you showed me the pictures. It was another, I guess you would say, life-changing moment right there, you know.
Okay. So you mentioned Andy's plesiosaurus. I'll just give a little context to that, and then we'll look at some of these creatures. Andrew Bjago a number of years back, 2008, 2009, both in writing published and then also in interviews that he gave publicly, described a creature that he called a plesiosaur. And he's not talking about the plesiosaur that today's paleontologists on Earth would be describing. That's just what he named this creature. And he described it as a creature having a long snake-like neck, a horse-like head, and a kind of tortoise-like short body. And very, very weird hybrid sounding kind of a creature. And I just want to mention also, William, that your pig-like creature that you described for me and that we're going to see is also a hybrid creature. In other words, it's not an actual boar like you would see on Earth. It has some differences, but it also has some striking similarities. And so I showed you a fossil, something that I originally thought was a sculpture, but actually was not a sculpture, it was a fossil, I since learned, of Andrewsjago's plesiosaur. And I had this photo and been aware of this thing on Mars quite a while before I ever heard of the existence of Andrewsjago. And I hadn't heard of the existence of you, or Andy, or the Mars Jumper and Program, or any of that, until quite a while after I had this photo of this plesiosaur type thing. And when I heard Andy describe that, knowing that he described it years before the photograph that I have was ever taken, it was mind-blowing to me, and it was strong, compelling evidence that Andy, I believed, had been on Mars. There's no way he could have known about that thing otherwise, and described it years before a photo of it was ever taken. And Andy, of course, has testified to the fact that you were on Mars with him. You have testified to the fact that he was on Mars with you. You've both testified to the fact that you had to defend yourselves and William Rhett Stillings against dive-bombing pterodactyls on Mars. And you described those things for me, both of you, in the interviews. And so, again, Andy hasn't Andrewsjago, even now as we're doing this recording, has not seen these photos that I'm showing to you. I've told him about seeing them, but he has not seen them. So let's move on, and I'll ask you to describe for me some of these photos and what you're seeing in them. So we'll move past the flash gun or pulse pistol here.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right, so this is a creature, and folks, you're seeing the photo not edited. It's the raw photo. It's enlarged. This is a creature that I thought, I thought initially might be the pterodactyl that you guys had described as being on Mars. I don't think that's what it is now, but I'd like you to just tell me your impression of this one.
Well, this is very similar to what we were talking about, but it isn't it. You can see the eye sockets and the lobes over the eyes. You can see the extended beak. It's not as long as a pterodactyl. You can see the kind of the pointy aspect of the back of the head. This one looks like it's sitting here kind of like with wings folded in front of it, I guess you could say. It's definitely looking out towards across the canyon for sure. This is very similar to one of the pterodactyls. It's not exactly, what we had encountered, but there was many different life forms that we were told to be aware of and everything. This is not the dangerous one that came after us that Andy and I had the conflict with when I was his security on Mars, when I brought him out into the open heading for another place where I had tossed him the weapon. It's very important for people to see things like this. You can even see the beak color in this. That's amazing.
Well, and I'll just say that this creature is looking out across a short valley at a dinosaur-like creature that's peering back at it. I'm not going to show that creature here. And again, this is not a cleaned up image. I'm just showing it kind of raw to everyone. It's a crop. And the images in the published books will be cleaner along with the raw images so that these can be independently checked out and verified by everyone. So let's go on and look at the actual pterodactyl. So this was a creature that I thought initially might be your pterodactyl.
Okay.
Let me go back to it.
There you go.
There we go. Okay. So there were well, 4 photos that NASA took of this. And in 3 of the 4, it smudged the head right off the top. So when you look at this, you can't really see a bird-like head in this one. But you see a body that looks like it could have folded wings, kind of like a bat. You know, the body here as if it were leaning against something or standing upright. So it's not completely clear what this is, but I looked at this and I thought, could that be a bird or a pterodactyl? And then when I found the other photos, and this is a raw photo, not cleaned up. This one is totally raw. One of the 4. You can see very clearly in this one, it's the same image, the head, and it's been sheared off to the left, as if NASA in 3 of the 4 images tried to smudge it right off so you couldn't see it, you couldn't make out what it is, like right here. But they missed one of the 4 images in this one. So when I adjust the color on this a little bit, it becomes even more obvious that you've got a beak-like head, a beak-like nose and mouth right here.
It's looking right at you.
And again, this is not an enhanced or cleaned up image, folks. I just adjusted the colors a little bit. When this is cleaned up, it will be more evident. So that's it sharpened right there. So we sharpened it and adjusted the colors a little bit. Look at how obvious the beak is on the head on this thing.
That's amazing.
And imagine that
Yeah.
over, this body right here. And that's the same creature. So I suspect that that is a pterodactyl or a creature like it on Mars. What's your impression, Wayne?
Very similar, friend. And part of the reason that I say that and everything is because you can see one of the wings. It's like I'm turning sideways, along with it because it is an amazing picture. I've seen this. It's got one of its, kind of how I guess a good example would be fruit bats here in the United States. The big foxes and everything that they call. And they pull their wings in like this, and this is what you see. But you can definitely see, the mouth aspect of it, the eyes there, and you can tell that part of the head has been cut off, and it's been kind of like they do on the Mars pictures and the Moon pictures. It's been kind of chopped off and phased, kind of where you can't really see everything. And it's a few times that you can see that, but the head is very, very similar. And the structure here, of course, it's fuzzed out a little bit.
Here they
they
sheared it off to the left. You can sort of see the beak right here a little bit, but hardly.
Yeah.
The shape is there, but you can't really make it out. They sheared it off to the left of the body. Really to the right if you were looking out from its perspective, but to the left from ours. And if we go back over here again, again, this is it again. So if we just sharpen this a little bit, you can see it really clearly right here. And auto adjust the colors again. Really obvious. So I think that's evidence of your pterodactyl on Mars.
Wow, amazing, amazing.
So
I've never seen these pictures until you showed them to me, and it gives me hope. It gives me hope that the truth is finally going to come out, and people are going to know exactly what's really going on, because they need to. They really need to.
They do. It's evidence that there really is a secret space program. It's evidence that you and presumably Andy Bjago have been, in fact, on Mars. And those 2 things alone show that there's been massive lying by governments to the populations of the world.
Definitely.
So
Definitely.
Let's go on to some other photos here. So this is your little pig-like creature.
There it is.
Again, this is not a cleaned up photo, folks, and you're looking at actually at least 3 distinct creatures in the foreground here. This one right here, and this kind of just to the right of the center, below the center right here. And the head is pretty difficult to make out on this photo. And then another little creature right over here that's got a snout, a couple of ears, an eye visible, the legs, really short legs on its body. Almost like it's being chased by this pig-like creature right here diagonally across the photo from upper right to bottom left. And this is an enlarged image. It's not the best enlargement. It has not been cleaned up at all. And if we simply sharpen this a little bit and then adjust the colors a little bit, What a difference.
Wow.
There's the creature again. You can see the snout, obvious shadow below it, so it's popped up above the ground. Pig-like nose, eyes,
Yeah.
ridged forehead, and then this strange back that it's got. And then the legs that come down that are kind of hard to make out. But nonetheless, you can see there's a lot of structure there. And then we're not looking at a rock. That's a creature.
Oh, no, you're not looking at a rock. This right here has its head up. You can see the structure of the face, the snout aspect of it, the eyes, the legs, everything. This is exactly what I described to you in our interview. And, you know, it does. Now that you mentioned it, and I hadn't thought about that before, but it really does look like it's kind of getting a better view of whatever it's looking at over here, probably that.
Yeah, this thing right here, this other creature at the bottom left.
This is amazing. It really brings back some memories here.
Yeah. And this thing, you can see the shadow of the mouth, the chin. I'm looking at the bottom left creature. The feet, you know, the legs. Obvious ear, obvious eye area right here.
Wow.
So two very distinct creatures in this photo, and then another one in between them, just below. That's difficult to make out, but believe it or not, folks, that also is a creature. And there are others in this photo that are just too difficult for the average person to see, so I'm not going to bother describing them, but I'll say that there's more than three just in what we're looking at. So, yeah, I was blown away when I found this photo, and when you described it for me in the interview, I just thought, wow. It's such a bizarre sounding creature, you know, the way that you described it with the snout like a pig and then the ridged back, and it's really a strange sounding creature. And I was reminded, you know, when you described that in our interview of Andrew Basiago's plesiosaur, though obviously this is not that creature. But I thought, another unique thing that only one person has ever described, and here's a photo of it. You know, it's evidence that you were there. No one else has shown this photo to the world. No one else knows about this photo as we're recording this interview.
That's amazing. I'm really surprised nobody else has identified these things that, you know, you and I, in an interview, we were able to get detailed information, and then you pop up with these photos. That's amazing. I mean, this is a necessary thing. More of this needs to get out there. And, you know, I know you're going to find more. Just looking at what you've done and the things you've showed me, it's really given me a hope in a lot of ways. And Andrew, too, I know, because he described a lot of things like you said. And we're finally finding these things in fossilization and pictures that NASA themselves is taking. You can't get any better than that right there. You really can't.
Yeah, you can't. And actually, I think that these are probably, most likely, what we're looking at right here, living creatures. I don't think that these are fossils, most likely. But
this one up here, that's a living creature. The one on the right, as I'm looking at it, the right top right there, the pig-looking one, that's not a fossil at all, in any way, shape, or form.
So let's move on and take a look at Andrew Basiago's plesiosaur.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another one that I said a little bit earlier when we were talking, is something that I knew about. NASA took a few photos of this. This is one of the clearest ones that I knew about before I ever heard of Andrew Basiago or you. And when I first saw this, I thought, man, the Martians are Satanists. they're creating statues or sculptures of serpents, you know, on the surface, because it's exactly what this looks like. But I came to realize subsequently that this is not a sculpture or a statue. It is, in fact, a fossil that was produced through some form of flash fossilization, where fossilization can happen extremely rapidly, and basically the entire outline of a creature, and oftentimes even the organs internally, can be preserved in terms of within the fossil. So this is a raw image. It is not cleaned up at all. It's as NASA photographed it. If we just adjust the colors a little bit here, folks, I'll just do auto adjust colors. Look at how much clearer that becomes. It hasn't been sharpened or anything. So what we have is a horse-like head right here. This is the eye. I don't know if you can see the cursor, but I've got it over the eye.
Yeah.
Kind of a horse-like shaped head, a serpent S-like shaped neck, and then a tortoise-like fat body back here, probably with another fossil on the very end of it, though that's not certain, the head of one. But nonetheless, that's a very clear image of what Andrew Bjago described. And here's the thing sharpened a little bit. There's a lot more in the photo, unfortunately, but like I said, this isn't the only one. NASA took a few photos of this. This is just one that I think is among the clearest. And I'll undo that sharpening. Again, there it is.
Wow.
And when I clean this up for the book, which it'll be by the time you folks finally get to actually see this, the books will be out. You'll be able to see the raw images, go back and find the original source images on NASA's websites. And then you'll also see the cleaned up images in the books. And as I've said, this is just the tip of the iceberg of what I'm bringing out in terms of evidence of complex biology, both past and present on Mars. I will also be bringing out comparable evidence concerning our moon and concerning comets and asteroids in our solar system and other bodies beyond that even. So this is bigger than Roswell in the sense that all the evidence is going to be independently verifiable. It's all officially sourced. Nobody's going to be capable of denying it. And what you have seen and heard in this interview is hard evidence that we've had human beings on Mars and elsewhere in our solar system, completely contrary to everything that NASA, our government, and other governments around the world have been saying for several decades now. So when I first showed this to you, William, can you tell me what your reaction was to it?
Shock and happiness, to be honest with you. I'm a scientific-minded individual. I want to see facts and everything. And after, what Andrew's describing, what I've described and everything, and then you're showing us the evidence here, Andrew and I can't jump back and go do what we did before, because once you're out of the programs, you don't see anybody or anything anymore, with very few exceptions. When I seen this right here, I knew this is fossil right here, exactly what Andrew had described. There's no doubt in my mind about it. And everything, especially the body, things of this nature, and the back aspect of it and everything. But you cannot, you could just look at this and tell what it is. The head, the shape, the ear aspects, the eyes, where the mouth would be and everything, the neck coming around and coming right back into this other structure, which is of a turtle-like thing. But also, if you look in that structure, you can see what looks very similar to like rib structure in there in a few places. So I'm pretty well astounded at your ability to find these things that we've been talking about and really verify them. I haven't seen anybody else really come up with the photos and things that we've described, except for you. Structures, of course, everybody's running into them, but the life forms, that's the key right there. The weapon, that's another key right there. They can't deny that. They just can't.
Yeah, and so this is what I wanted to cover today. I'm going to wrap up by, again, describing myself a little bit, where these things can be found. Once you folks who are seeing this and listening to this actually get to see it, you'll have available to you a great deal more in my published books. So William, again, just wrap it up. Tell us about your background again briefly, how people can contact you or get more information from you, and then I'll do likewise.
Sure. My name is William Wycrow. WilliamWycrow.com. I'm on Facebook as well, Twitter, LinkedIn as well. Just William Wycrow, search for me in any of those and you'll find me. My experiences, I've been involved in limited access programs, as secret space program for sure, 100% there. I've had experiences all my life with other technologies, other beings and everything, and I never talked about it. And it took Andrew several years, about 30 years to find me, and another year or so on top of that just to get me to come out. And I didn't want to talk about it anymore. But I'm glad I did, because now the proof, the evidence, and technology is there to show exactly what we talked about is real. It is not a figment of imagination. Why would two different people from two different aspects of life have the same experiences? The things that we did in those programs are finally coming out, and I'm happy they are. You've done some fantastic work here, Tim. That's about the best I could say right there. And I'm looking forward to finding out more.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll just say, you know, the Lord led me to this. There are innumerable people around the world trying to find these things, and the photos are available. They're out there. It's just that the sheer volume and size of so many of these photos, one human being could spend their entire life going through the photos that are already out there and never get through everything carefully. So really, God has led me to this. He kind of dropped it in my lap. It's not something I ever expected to be involved with or to be researching or pursuing. And I've decided to do it because I think it's just that important. And again, my name is author Tim Cohen, Cohen. I'm the author of The Antichrist and Cup of Tea, as well as the forthcoming Messiah, History, and the Tribulation Period multi-volume series, which you can find both of those on a website called prophecyhouse.com, prophecyhouse.com. And then additionally, a series of books that deal with Mars, the moon, comets and asteroids, other bodies in our solar system, and secret space programs, and deals with the complex biology on all of those, and shows how all of that lines up much better with the idea of a creationist account, believe it or not, of the universe and of our solar system, rather than what modern cosmologists and astronomers and so forth have claimed and evolutionists claim. So, shockingly, this evidence, what I'm going to be presenting, goes beyond just showing that NASA and the government have been lying about where we've been in our solar system.
Oh yeah, I'm blown away.
And I'll just say
Really blown.
on this last photo that we're looking at, this photo is actually sitting in the midst of a bunch of artificial structures on Mars. I have cropped it. So there's a whole bunch of stuff around this thing that none of you guys are getting to see that's going to be in the book. So,
Fantastic.
artificial structures, in other words, evidence of the use of high technology. So, William, thank you. I'm going to stop our interview here, stop the recording, and God bless you. So let's see how this turns out, and hopefully the whole world will get to see this and know the truth finally.
Okay. So before I shut this video down, I just want to point out a couple things. We're going to talk about this, and you would have heard this if the presentations had been in the order I had anticipated. I want to point out a couple of things in this. You're not going to be able to see it right now, but it's food for thought. Maybe some of you will see it, but it's unlikely. But I want to point it out, okay? So around this fossil, there are actually a whole bunch of others. There are a bunch of creatures right here in this photo. So for example, those are the eyes of one right there, and that's its nose. There's an eye and a mouth of another one. Nostrils, mouth of another one.
You said fossil.
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Mouth of another one, eyes, nose, eyes. They're all dead. They're piled on a hill, basically, right behind this thing. Just how they died. Buried, but flash fossilized. So you're not looking at bones. You're looking at something that goes beyond just bones, more structure than that captured in the fossils. But in any case, I'm pointing that out because heads is what we usually see on Mars. We don't often see something that's completely visible or excavated like that. But you're going to see some stunning examples that are later today in the other 2 hours. So these fossils, these images you just saw, are pretty mediocre compared to a lot that I have that are in the books. I'll show you some of those today. But nonetheless, that's good enough. That should convince the whole world right there, what you just saw. We're just getting started. All right. So this thing, I mentioned it in the main presentation. I had hoped to have time today to put these in sequence to show them to you in a more sensible fashion. So you're going to have to put up with me fumbling through it today. If you come tomorrow, you'll see it in a better order. Okay? I call this creature a photobomber because it moves radically between frames. So NASA took a number of photographs of this thing, and you can't see it right here. So this is not enlarged, in other words. And the software I'm using right here is called Earphone View. And I'll recommend later to you all that you all get it because we can easily zoom in on things. But what I want you to see right here is the rover. Okay? And then I want you to pay attention to what's in the corner right up here. I'm going to show you different photos taken in sequence just minutes apart by NASA. Okay? So that is unfortunately not a great screen, hard for you to see. Let me see if I can do anything to make that more visible. And this software is pretty primitive adjustment capabilities, but it's free. And it's got one feature that nothing else can touch that's useful for what you need. All right, so what I want you to see is just this thing that looks like a rock, this thing that looks like a rock, okay? And what's in between, or more specifically, what's not there, okay? You're gonna see this in a minute. So pay attention to this. This is a head, this is a head, that's a head. I don't expect you to be able to recognize that right now, okay? It'd be very unusual if you could. This is a head right here, so that's actually a reptile right there sticking its head up above the surface. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are many others in this photo, but they're very hard to recognize. Then you got these two things that look like a rock. They're not rocks, they're actually body parts of dead creatures. But all I want you to notice is what's there and what's not there in the photo in terms of its appearance. All right, this is another photo. Well, no, it's not. I think it's the same thing, hang on. No, it is. So there are 4 sets of right-left photos. So NASA has a right cam and a left cam on the rover. I got it backwards, right? But anyhow, what you're seeing is the photos in stereo in a sense. So this is the same thing, just taken with the other camera at the same instant by the rover. And sometimes one is clearer than the other, but same moment in time. 2 different photos taken by 2 different cameras, left and right. So again, notice what's there and what's not there, okay? Which doesn't mean anything to you yet, but it soon will. Okay? Now this is another photo, same thing. Okay, here's the rover. But the rocks that you just saw are these right here. Okay? Different corner. The rover shifted its position slightly. Okay? I'm going to show you this. I want you to see what's here. Okay, so we'll zoom in a little at a time. So over here you've got actually, that's the dead head of a creature, a corpse, laying there on the surface. This is another one. Many of these are dead heads, but in some cases these are reptiles that have popped up above the surface that are not dead. This is a corpse. I don't know if this thing is dead or alive for reasons that I'll explain later, but you'll notice it's got a little tail-like thing coming off right here. Okay? Okay, so this is a dead head right here, part of a fossil basically. It's broken off. But again, what I want you to focus on really is what's right here. So notice we've shifted our position. Look at this thing right here, okay? You see 2 black things sticking up on the end right there?
Yes.
And this right here? Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
It's hard to make out, okay? So many of the creatures on Mars are well camouflaged. They're actually like chameleons or like octopi, which is strange, but they have camouflage abilities. This is one of those creatures that does, except for its ears. Its ears don't. So when this thing moves, you're going to see those ears shift between frames, which is why I'm pointing this out. Okay, but I want you to see this thing right here too. You can't make that out very well, but let me zoom in. So there's 2 things I'm pointing out right here. This right here, okay? And then those ears, again, so what I want you to, again, focus on is this and this for the moment, okay? Watch what happens as we go to new photos. All right, so this is not the other pair of that left or right. This is one of the other 4 sets of photos here, but that's fine. You're going to see some shifts here. So here's our ears for that creature I pointed out a moment ago. Notice where it is, and this is its nose, by the way. You can hardly make it out. This is the outline of the creature. This is its head right here. Those ears were further over here. This thing was not there at all. And notice what was back here isn't there anymore. That's this thing, I think. But this is the creature that I'm calling the photobomber. So here it is. It's to the right of these 2 things, right? And it's between this and this, right? I want you to see that. I want you to notice those ears. So let's go back again for a moment. Okay, so our photobomber is completely missing right here. It's not there at all. This creature is over here instead of over here. You see that? Is everybody catching that?
Yeah.
Okay, it gets better though. Okay, this is the other pair, I think, of the one that I told you I wasn't showing you a pair of. So, again, notice our photobomber creatures here. The ears are over here now instead of right here.
Yeah.
Notice this thing right here, too. I'm going to point that out in a minute, okay? And again, this tail looks like a devil's tail, right? You notice that?
Yes.
Find a rock anywhere on Earth that's got a structure like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, this is actually a creature right here. This crack in it makes me think it's dead, but I'm not so sure because in another fossil, the crack isn't there because of the angle that it's shot at, or another photo, I mean to say. All right, so let's go on. All right, another in our series of photos here. Again, notice what isn't there.
The rabbit.
The ears are not there.
They're gone.
Neither is the photobomber. Nowhere around.
Yeah.
Okay, they're not here.
And the tail looks different.
And the
well,
tail has
the-
shifted a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, that looks different now.
Okay, still got the crack there though.
Yeah.
Notice you can make out the head of this thing over here that's dead.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's the mouth, the eye. Okay.
Rhinoceros without a horn.
There are actually several other creatures and heads in here. You just buried. This is the buried head right here that's partially exposed. They're all over the place, in fact. This is another creature up here. In fact, that's our creature with the ears right there. You see the ears?
Yes.
It's over here now, instead of over here or right here.
Wild.
And how far apart? Seconds?
Minutes,
Minutes?
maybe seconds, but I'm going to say minutes to be conservative. But they're in close succession. This is the other pair of the stereo pair. Okay, again, you don't see the photobomber. You do see the thing with the ears over here. Okay, nothing around these, right? Now watch this. Look what happened. Our photobomber's way over here now. Instead of here, we're on the other side of that creature.
Wow.
Wow.
There it is.
Yeah.
Pretty incredible, huh?
Kind of looks like a little gargoyle or something.
Well, in fact, this is a shell right here. It's actually upright.
Uh-huh.
And on the back, it's got a shell, which is what this dark area is that you're seeing, because you're seeing the shadow under the shell. So it's actually got a shell around it. Its head is actually right here.
Oh, wow.
And it's got other creatures that have popped their heads up around it. So there's one, there's one, there's one.
Yeah.
Oh.
But notice this right here. That wasn't in the other photos.
No, it wasn't.
Another creature has popped up over here in place of our photobomber. Right there. It's popped its head up to the ground.
Wow.
Okay, so you've just seen a series of 4 stereo pairs of images taken minutes apart by a NASA rover with evident creatures that shift dramatically between the photos. That's not just proof of, past life or complex biological life. That's proof of ongoing life on Mars.
Do they give us any data as to the atmosphere, the heat, the temperature,
NASA's lied about all of that. In
Yeah.
fact, I cover all of that in detail, including what some physicists have to say about it in the series of books that I'll be talking about in our next session. How are we doing on time?
We have about 5 minutes,
Okay.
and then we'll be on the main stage,
Okay.
and Josh Thompson doing the.
So is there anyone here who doesn't get that or thinks that what I've just said is not accurate or true, that we've just seen evidence that creatures moved on Mars?
Can you tell what
No,
size
sorry,
of it?
is there anyone here who does not get that or who disagrees with what I've just said? I need an honest response.
No, we see the stuff is living.
So raise your hand if you agree that you've just seen proof that there's current life on Mars, please.
At first I was
Is there-
a skeptic.
Yeah. Okay. So
I'm
you
glad
agree
I got
that you
to
just
see the
seen
proof.
some creatures massively move between a series of photos that are minutes apart?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right. That's what I wanted to accomplish in this session. I'm going to show you much more stunning images in our upcoming session. Okay, so evidence that we've been to Mars, evidence that there's current complex biological life on Mars like this and this.
And the weird double-tailed thing.
The change.
Well,
Yeah,
notice
his
the
eyes
crack
are
isn't there. You
closed.
remember I pointed out that crack in the thing? Where'd it
Yeah.
go?
Right. And his tail changed.
His tail changed.
Well, the tail would be over here, but you
I
got
know,
change
but the
between those
tail
other photos.
changed from a triangle
from
to
the
a
flat to sideways.
Yep, yep. So again, this will be in the books, but again, I'm barely scratching the surface here.
Do you have
And
books here for sale?
they're not yet published, but they are available for sale. Pre-publication purchase is available through the website, and I'll cover that in the next
What
session.
website is that?
Prophecyhouse.com, PROPHECYHOUSE.com, and it's a series of 8 books, 7 books in a series, and then an 8th book that's a coffee table book of just photos. But it covers most of our solar system where there's life.
Thank you.
So it's very organized, and you'll see that when you look up the volumes and so forth. But I'll show you that actually in the next session. Okay, so is everyone coming? Is there anyone who's going to miss that session? So can I skip giving the contact information here?
Well, we're doing just moving up there.
Yeah, is everyone coming? Okay.
Yeah.
So we're done then for now.
Oh, yeah, we're excited. Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you. Those are up front. Okay.
All right, you're good to go, Tim.
Thank you. Okay, let me just say a bit about myself to start. So, I'm a longtime author of, I guess, over 30 years at this point, researcher, scientist, and former military person. So I attended the Air Force Academy in the past, served in the Air Force, got out, did a lot of stuff in IT, and then, of course, I've been writing books for over 30 years. Over the last few years, I've been working on a series of books on exobiology. Today, we're going to focus on one of those primarily, which deals with Mars and what's really on it. But I need to say a few things here. So you're going to catch me reading from the slides just a little bit before I get into my main points. So, our solar system, Mars, Earth, Moon, and other bodies are actually populated, most of them, with dangerous and carnivorous creatures. And I believe that NASA knows this. The European Space Agency knows this. Japan's Space Agency knows this. China's Space Agency knows this. So I'm going to be showing you some pretty jaw-dropping photos today, but I'm barely scratching the surface of what's actually in the book, so just know that. You're going to feel pretty overwhelmed by what I share today. There's no way you won't. It's okay, but it's nothing compared to what's coming in the books. So I address other questions of aliens, for example, abductions. What are these aliens really about? Who are they? Really, where did they come from? How do they fit into the grand scheme of things? Everything you can imagine, the questions that people have been asking, I have those answers and I actually give them in the books. So evidence suggesting certain whistleblowers were on Mars. We saw that in the prior hour because the presentations got swapped. So if you were there, then you know that there's some evidence that we have been to Mars. And then background information. How is it that these creatures are even possible in places like Mars or our moon, comets or asteroids, Pluto, of all places, has creatures on it. So, really strange stuff is out there. There are things that are biologically possible that our science up to this point has denied. And I give the explanations to the extent that I can in the books. But when you see photos and you know what you're looking at, you know it's there, then we have to figure out how that's possible later. All right, this is the series itself. It's called Solar Apocalypse. This is where you can get it. You know, you can pre-publication purchase it now. It's available to purchase, but it's not out yet. It'll be a few months. These are the volumes in the series. So the first one deals with the context of what's out there, how it got there, when, why it was put there, etc. And also the scientific information largely for how it's possible, biologically. Alien infestation of Mars is what we're going to talk about today. But you'll notice I also cover the moon, comets and asteroids, Pluto and other planets, and also other moons I should mention. And then claims of secret space programs and quote-unquote aliens. Are these things, these creatures, are they actually real aliens? And we're going to have a conversation about that later. And then soft disclosures on aliens and secret space programs in media, meaning television, movies, etc. I primarily focus on those arenas because that's what everybody's mostly paying attention to in our modern era. But some of these things come through books, they come through comics, they come through all kinds of bizarre sources. Okay? So this is a little bit of a warning to NASA, the European Space Agency, people in secret space programs, any other nefarious actors who might try to interfere with this. There's stuff I'm going to show you today that they'd kill me for. So basically, I'm holding back. Even with everything that's in the series, I'm holding back. There are things that will come out later, unless they interfere with this, and then it will all come out at once. But additionally, I'm warning NASA and so forth not to tamper with the photos, what's available online currently. I'm going to give the links to all of the images that you see in the books. There will be live links in the ebooks when the ebooks are out. Those are going to be later. And printed links that you can type up and you can go directly to the images on NASA's site, European Space Agency, wherever. You can go to the exact images that I'm showing, but additionally I'm giving XY coordinates. So we'll come to that. And software that you can use to go to an XY coordinate pair in some huge panoramic image that you pull down from NASA or wherever. So you go to that exact spot and see exactly what I enlarged, cropped, and showed in the book. So you can see there's no tampering, no fake photos here, totally legit and all officially sourced. Yeah, so I don't need to say more than that there. Oh, but I will say, I know there are people who believe in angels here, but I will tell you, they are real, and nobody should mess with me on this stuff. Okay, so in the books, I talk about what you need in terms of software to produce the kinds of things that I produce in the books. I actually have a variety of degrees, including in imaging. So here, I will give actual examples of software you can get. Many packages that are free, some that are not. But this one I'm mentioning by name right here, Earphone. After today, you will all want to get that. And I have an exercise, by the way. I brought 20 copies of them, 10 for today, 10 for tomorrow, to hand out to those who'd like to have it, where you can use Earphone View, go pull an image off the NASA's site, and find, well, several dozen fossils that I've given XY coordinate pairs to within that image. So you can do your own little exercise and begin to familiarize yourselves with how to do this. All right, so I am a Christian, and I am going to put this in the context of Christianity, meaning Noah's flood, how that stuff got out there and when. You know, there are people, probably in this audience, some who I know are going to be in this audience, who say that the catastrophe that struck Mars was some 64 or 65 million years ago. That is not true. It was in fact only thousands of years ago, and it was in conjunction with the time frame of Noah's flood, which on Earth was just under 4,400 years ago. And you're going to understand why this is an important point when we talk about living creatures on Mars. Mars is so devastated that the idea of finding the life that's there after 1 million years, 100,000 years, tens of millions of years is ludicrous. Okay? It's ludicrous. And this is one reason that a lot of people don't think we're going to find life on Mars. The planet is obviously devastated, right? That's setting aside the fact that NASA has completely lied about the atmosphere and the temperatures on Mars during the daytime temperatures, okay? Setting that aside, it's still so devastated, it's difficult to conceive of ongoing life after that kind of a period. But in reality, it only happened thousands of years ago. So I want to define some terms because I want to put everything that I'm about to say subsequently into a particular context for you. So God created mankind, biblically, just under 6,000 years ago in his image, meaning he made his body, soul, and spirit, God his Father, Word, and Holy Spirit, in the New Testament and in the Old Testament. Made in his image, but we're not God's. The reason I point this out is because there are a lot of people today who are buying the line that the aliens created us.
Yeah.
That's why we and they have genes in common. That's why they look humanoid, like us, sort of, right? They're coming here and they're saying, we were involved in creating you by altering life on Earth and mixing some of our own genes in with it. Okay? The reality is exactly the opposite. They come from us. And I will explain. Angels. Angels are the only real aliens, if you want to call them that, because they didn't originate on Earth, nor did they evolve, on Earth. God created them directly, but they're not from here. So you could legitimately call angels aliens. Although they are what Scripture says. Rebellion in heaven. So, right before the fall of mankind in the Garden of Eden, there was war in the heavens. And there's evidence of war in our solar system in the past after that. Okay? But biblically, 1/3 of the angels, there's an innumerable number of angels that God created, fell. They transgressed against God under Satan, who is basically the most powerful of the fallen angels, Lucifer. And they've been at war with God ever since. And in the Garden of Eden, Lucifer, Satan, sought to enlist mankind in that war against God. The solution, so to deal with that, God created hell. All of this is the context for what follows and what's actually in our solar system, which I'm going to show you today. So everyone's heard the Nephilim, right?
Yeah.
And many people associate that word with the Anunnaki. Anunnaki is not a biblical word. Nephilim is a biblical word. It's a Hebrew word. And it's a plural word. So it's plural of Nephil. Nephil means fallen, and it means liar. These are not great creatures. They're fallen liars. That's what the Hebrew text actually calls them. That's the meaning of the word Nephilim. Who's ever heard that? Okay? Anunnaki, the question is, did they exist, and were they Nephilim? You can call them whatever they like, but the Nephilim did exist, yes. Oh, and this is an important point. I told you that the humanoids came from us, these creatures that are claiming to be aliens. Okay? It began right after the fall of mankind, where some of the fallen angels, not all of them, came into human women, took them as wives, raped them, forcibly took them as wives, I presume, impregnated them, and the children that were born to them were human angels. In other words, they were supernatural beings, but they had flesh and bone like you and I do. They were larger, typically, than us. They were the demigods of war, and they didn't quite look human because they weren't quite human, but they were hybrids. They were the first hybrids that existed. Okay? When one of these creatures dies, it becomes a demon. Okay? I don't know if any of you have ever encountered a demon, but if you physically have the opportunity to see one, and it's not something you want to see, but if you do, and they're not possessing someone, they generally look like a dark shadow. And the Hebrew text actually calls them shades or shadows. That's what it actually calls them. That's exactly how they look. Even at night, if you see one, the light behind it is completely blotted out. You can see the outline of the demon. Okay? I personally have encountered them. They do attack people. They attack Christians occasionally. It's rare. They possess non-Christians, and they possess creatures. Okay? I mention this because the Nephilim that were on earth when Noah's flood occurred, that had remained on earth, were killed, and they became the demons that have been wandering the planet ever since. But they weren't all killed because they didn't all remain on earth. So we're going to get to that. All right. What was the solar apocalypse? So we can look between Mars and Jupiter, and there's evidence of one or more destroyed planets. That's really the source, the origin of comets and asteroids in our solar system. It is not some remnant of coalescing dust and gas and protomatter, whatever you wish to call it, that failed to become a planet or a moon or a star or this kind of thing wandering our solar system. That is completely false. Now, we do see evidence. The solar system's forming in the universe like modern cosmology would claim today. That is not how our solar system started. And the universe, when it was first created, had the appearance of age in the same way that Adam did. From the first second of Adam's life, he was a fully grown adult male who already had knowledge. That's how God made him. From the very instant of his creation. The appearance of age from the start. Same thing with our universe, initially. Now it's like a clock. And so a lot of the processes physicists and cosmologists see are happening. New solar systems are being formed and so forth. That's happening. But that's not how it began. Okay, so the solar apocalypse. I told you Noah's flood was just under 4,400 years ago. Noah and his sons were building the ark for 120 years. Before the flood on earth, human beings lived to be almost 1,000 years in age, average. You never saw a rainbow on the surface of the planet, according to the scripture, before the flood. Earth had a supersaturated water vapor canopy type atmosphere. one huge continent, a supercontinent, which you might call Atlantis, you can call it whatever you like, but it's what it was before the flood happened, less than 5,000 years ago. But the Nephilim were hearing the preaching, they were hearing the warnings of what was going to happen to life on earth, that it was going to be wiped out, that God was going to bring this devastating flood, that only what was aboard the ark would survive. And the Nephilim had technology. It was given to them by angels. They were part angel. They were exchanging it with human beings who were beginning to worship them, and also whom they enslaved. So voluntary and involuntary. And they filled the world with violence. Now, Scripture is silent on most of what I just told you. What Scripture does tell us is that the world became filled with violence following this activity, following the fall of mankind, and following the activity that the Nephilim engaged in. The world became so filled with violence that God hated what was happening on earth, and he decided to wipe it out, other than what he brought aboard the ark. So we don't have dinosaurs on earth today, right? They're gone. They aren't here, for the most part. We see some huge lizards, right? There are still a few around, but they're not that huge. You know, alligators, crocodiles, Komodo dragons. Okay? Nothing like the dinosaurs, though, that we see in our museums, right? They're just bones mostly. Okay? So when was it? Around the time of Noah's flood, I believe that God judged what was happening elsewhere in our solar system. The Scripture doesn't talk about that, but we're going to get to more detail on that in a moment. All right, so the Nephilim, again, first humanoid hybrids. This was Satan's hybridization program. There are a fair number of Christian creationists who think that the dinosaurs were not original creations of God, that they were hybrids of life that God created here on earth, and of course lizards keep growing until they're killed, right? Life did live longer, generally, before the flood. However, the dinosaurs aren't around today. God wiped them out with a flood on earth, which suggests that they weren't intended to survive. You know, he preserved aboard the ark the creatures that were not hybrids, that were as he created them and us. Okay, because the hybrids are actually quite dangerous, and you're going to get a sense of that when I begin to show you what's on Mars. The stuff that I showed in our prior hour just doesn't do it justice at all. What's really there, okay? So, in other words, other life on Earth began to be hybridized by these hybrids. They started to try to remake Earth, if you will, in their own image, to change the creation and the balance that God put here into something different. And it became very violent, and God said enough. But Noah then, preaching for 120 years, gave the Nephilim opportunity if they weren't doing it sooner, and I submit that they were doing it sooner because of the extent of their efforts. The evidence that's out there in the solar system, which I'll touch upon today. For at least 120 years, they had the opportunity to leave the earth, take their hybrids with them, go somewhere else, take human slaves. You know, there are notions of these breakaway human civilizations like the Nordics, right? They appear human. So not all of these creatures that are coming in anti-gravity craft, saucers and so forth and saying, hey, we're aliens, or we're here to help you, we want to exchange technology, you know, or give us permission to abduct people, right? That kind of thing. Anyway, I don't really want to talk too much about abduction stuff, but I do in the books. I address what it's really all about and how dangerous it is to mankind. So it's not benign in any sense of the word. But God is going to stop it in the same way he stopped this stuff in the past. So earth became filled with violence. Noah's flood occurred as a consequence. I believe there was an unstated judgment elsewhere in our solar system. We have evidence of that, like I said. Apparent planets blown up. Mars struck this huge gouge on the surface of Mars. And Mars' oceans literally blown into space. So listen, if the solar system really were billions of years old, as NASA and others claim, and Mars' atmosphere was very slowly evaporating into space, right? You wouldn't be getting comets from past oceans on Mars, would you? And comets would only be dust, ice, you know, mud, rock. If you were really bizarrely fortunate, you might find some bacteria on comets that had floated through space and landed there because Earth got blasted in the past, or Mars did, or wherever. So bacteria blew off into space, happened to float there and land on a comet. We just happened to land there and test it, okay? Voila! Wow! Amazing, right? That's all you could find if evolutionary cosmology was true, okay? I completely upended in this series, not with science or speculation, though there is that, but with actual hard evidence. So in reality, comets throughout our solar system are filled with complex biological life, huge, dangerous, hybrid creatures, and it is not all dead. So, in the photographs, the evidence for that is in one of the volumes in this series. Impossible under any model of evolution. No comet that exists, no asteroid that exists has ever had the kind of atmospheric conditions, the electrical storm, lightning type conditions, etc., that are required in any laboratory proposition by evolutionists for the creation of even simple proteins and amino acids, okay? There are lots of other reasons that stuff's not possible, evolution as it were. But setting that aside, no evolution could ever happen on a comet or an asteroid, even if evolution were possible. The conditions aren't there for it. And yet, all the comets and most of the asteroids in our solar system are filled with complex biological life. There are almost no exceptions. All right, false gods. These creatures, these hybrids, wanted mankind to worship them. You know, Satan, the reason the rebellion happened is because he wanted to set his own throne above the stars of God. He was the most powerful class of angels that God created, the cherubim and seraphim, okay? It's plural in Hebrew. Don't ask me what it means. But these are angels, okay? So Satan was the anointed cherub, the messianic cherub before he fell, before he transgressed. God took his place in the form of the real Messiah by taking on a human body, Christ Jesus. Okay, but Satan led a third of the angels in rebellion against God. They want to be worshipped as their own gods. The Nephilim, their progeny, the exact same thing. And so we find in human lore, mythology, exactly that, where you've got these demigods demanding worship. You know, they're not quite angels, but they aren't human either. Okay, alien allies. So there were human beings who volunteered to be part of this thing, who worshiped these creatures, who became allies with them in the past. A past secret space program before Noah's flood, on which again Scripture is silent. We can infer it though from what's actually out in our solar system, and I'm going to show that in this whole series, but I'm going to begin to touch on it today for you. Nordics, they look completely human by all accounts. Most of the time, they have longer lives than us, like humans before Noah's flood. For all we know, and I don't know, they could be fully human, as opposed to humanoid, breakaway civilization. Human beings who had worshipped these Nephilim in the past left Earth, and now they're returning. And they live here, actually, now, among us, in many cases. Okay, enlistment to war. So, in exchange for being able to abduct human beings, conducting their programs without interference, taking biological samples from other life on Earth, you know, claiming that they've so evolved themselves, quote unquote, that they're no longer able to reproduce, they're going to die out unless we help them. They want to merge with us, give us some of your biological material, let us try to produce bodies that are better than the ones we've got at this point, so we can survive too. And in exchange for all that, and working with us and all that, we'll give you technology. And by the way, there are these other bad aliens out there. If they come along, we'll help you in defending yourselves against them, right? So there's this, and this is all very loose, right? I'm more detailed, obviously, in the books, but I want to give you the idea. They're engaging mankind as if we are their allies. They want something from us. They give something to us. Those who don't know better among human leaders, military personnel, etc., think, we can't necessarily trust these folks, but what's the harm in having their technology? It can only help us if they turn out to be bad, right? On the other hand, if they're telling the truth, well, yeah, we want their help, and as long as they're not killing human beings when they're abducting them, they're returning them mostly intact, they wipe their memories, okay. We think we can live with that, you know, for a while here. So that's the kind of thing that's going on. In reality, they're reproducing themselves and producing new races of humanoids. That's what the program is really about. They don't have the ability in many cases to self-reproduce because they're not intended to exist. Hybrid creatures aren't supposed to exist. God put genetic barriers in the life that He created on Earth to prevent that. But they bypass that, and many of these creatures successfully, particularly reptiles and insects and so forth. They're trying to do it with the humanoids. They've succeeded to an extent. We don't want them to fully succeed because that would be bad for mankind. And ultimately, God will put a stop to it. But again, I want to point out, this is an enlistment to war. They're preparing mankind to go to war against God and Christ and his angels when it comes to Armageddon. That's what it's really about. So when Christ and his angels return, some years from now, they're going to say, well, here's the evil alien invasion we've been warning you about, and if you don't get on the ball and work with us on this, a lot of what's on earth, your militaries, etc., are going to be wiped out. They've flipped the truth on its head. Okay? Of course, it's no contest, but it's a certain level of insanity anyway to try to make war against God, right? He created the universe, and if you believe that, you know, Satan's like an amoeba. By comparison, it takes a real level of insanity for these creatures to decide to try to make war against God as if they had any hope. They don't. Okay, divine forewarning. So Noah warned mankind for 120 years. Pre-flood secret space program. Enough time to escape Earth. Talked about that. All right. So hybrid expanse. It turns out that they created a very dense ecosystem on a lot of these bodies in our solar system. Very, very dense, just like on Earth. That means that their program was probably happening for longer than 120 years before the flood. Okay? And you're going to get an idea of just how dense today. Unimaginably dense. So probably been doing it for a long time before the flood. Conspirators, they know and they're fearful. So the things I'm going to show you, some of them today, are impossible, but they're real. They're as scary as you could possibly imagine. They're beyond anything Hollywood has imagined, but they exist. And I think NASA has looked at some of this stuff. Some of the other secret space program folks and space agencies have looked at some of this stuff. NASA, that's not privy to the secret space programs, they're aware of some of this. They can't explain what's out there because they're evolutionists. They have no context, no understanding of how that stuff's out there, why it's out there, when it got there, whether it's still dangerous, whether it can get to Earth, the threats that are posed, and if they can't figure it out, they certainly don't want to tell the public about it. But I do have it figured out. It's in the series. Okay, so past war in the heavens. I believe that's what happened between Mars and Jupiter. When Noah's flood happened here on Earth, there's evidence of asteroid impacts here on Earth, right? If Earth is really just under 6,000 years old, those things couldn't have been that long ago, and in fact, they certainly haven't happened, not the size of what we see the evidence for, since Noah's flood. It would have had to have been right before or as a trigger event for Noah's flood itself. And that's entirely plausible. The supercontinent, its crust was broken up. The water vapor canopy atmosphere was collapsed. So now we see rainbows on the Earth. We have a thinner atmosphere than before the flood. Oxygen and carbon dioxide both decreased. We don't live as long. There's radiation that hits the surface of the planet that didn't at all before the flood, that damages us, that didn't before the flood. And there's a lot of life, plant life and so forth, that died. Nutrition that's gone from the environment. So we don't live as long. Okay, ill-prepared, intrasolar judgment led to decimated hybrid worlds. Between Mars and Jupiter, one or two planets got blown up. They no longer exist. They're asteroids and comets. I presume, I don't know obviously, I presume they had oceans on them. And whatever was in those oceans got blown into space. And I said, everything that we're looking at, every comet, every asteroid that we've visited has these things on it. Which suggests to me it's throughout the solar system, all of them. Except for the metal cores of those planets, right? Those wouldn't have creatures. But the point here is that Mars is known to have had ocean life. Or an ocean, I mean to say. I know it had ocean life. But it's known to have quite a lot of water it did in the past. That was all blown into space, and you've got this scar on Mars. The planet itself wasn't exploded, like what happened between Mars and Jupiter. But there's a good bet that some of its surface, besides water, got blown into space. If that's true, and if Mars was densely populated before the flood, and is still densely populated today, then you would find hybrid life in comets and asteroids. And that's exactly what we do find. And it's exactly what no form of evolution can explain. Okay? It's impossible. One reason they're not talking about it, okay? Most of these people at NASA and these other places are evolutionists. It doesn't jive with their worldview. Drives them nuts. They're scared of it. They don't know what to make of it. Okay? Killed demons are killed Nephilim, I mean, say are demons. Humanoids are not highly evolved. If they can't reproduce, let me ask you, are they superior or inferior to us?
Inferior.
You know, they may have bigger brains because they've been genetically tampered with and other things have been done to modify them, initially by the fallen angels, to fool mankind, right? You know, it's a great way to fool mankind into believing in evolution, right? Into giving an alternate explanation for how we got here. A lot of people who look at aliens and UFOs and so forth, they know that there's an issue with evolution. Why do you think panspermia has become so popular? You know, if you don't want to believe in God as our creator and you don't want to accept the biblical explanation, the only option you have then is we came here from somewhere else, right? It's your only other option. But consider this. Let's assume for a moment that evolution is true. How favorable is Earth for that to occur versus any other place we know about in our solar system? Exponentially so, right? Every other environment in the solar system is radically harsh compared to our environment here. So what sense is there to say, oh, well, you know, we must have gotten here from somewhere else because evolution here isn't working. It can't happen scientifically. People are waking up to that. But they're still buying this lie that these quote-unquote aliens created us, right? Yet they're waking up to the fact that it didn't work here. So why are they buying into the idea that it happened somewhere else? If it couldn't happen here, in highly favorable conditions, how in the world is it going to happen on Mars or the moon or anywhere else for that matter in our solar system? The notion is silly, but they don't take it to the logical conclusion, right? Okay? So reproduction through abduction, that's what's happening. That's how these creatures are reproducing. It's also how they're attempting to reach the point where they can self-reproduce, to where they don't need biological material from humans or other creatures on Earth. They're trying to get there. But they're not highly evolved. They are what Scripture would call abominations. They're not supposed to exist. And they are a great threat to mankind. They're not just at war with God. Okay, so primary hybrids. Let's talk about what's actually out there in terms of hybrid life. Mammals can't survive the conditions in most places on our solar system without technological help, artificial environments and so forth. There are more hardy creatures, however, on Earth. So, and not fish per se, but particularly reptiles, insects, and some amphibians, okay? And then you can mix that with tardigrades and genes of fish, humans in some cases, but you can actually produce much hardier creatures. You can produce creatures that don't need an atmosphere to live. And I'm going to show that in the series. Our moon is full of hybrid life, and they do not need an atmosphere to live. And I can prove that the creatures are alive on the moon. The proof is as compelling as what I showed you with the photobomb in our prior session. Okay? And so I do demonstrate that in the series. You wonder why NASA hasn't been back to the moon? You've got all these conspiracy theories about humanoids, having bases there. They warned us off kind of thing, right? This kind of thing. That's nonsense. That is not why we haven't been back. It's because NASA is NASA, the public NASA, okay? What they admit to, they're terrified of what's actually on our moon. It's beyond what you can imagine, and you're going to understand it when we get to the end of this presentation. Okay, exploded and scarred planets, comets, and asteroids derived from what I call the solar apocalypse. That's how I'm referring to the event in the past in our solar system, but also because this is the real revelation. These books have the real information that everyone in this arena, UFOs, quote-unquote aliens, ETs, and so forth, who've been pursuing this, trying to understand what it's all about, where these creatures really come from, what the agendas actually are, and so forth. The answers are in this series, and it's not what we've been told. And again, I'm not just saying that, I've got tons of evidence for that in the books. So Mars, hybrid populated oceans and surfaces blown into space. What's actually in comets and asteroids proves my point. Okay? It didn't evaporate over time. And Mars' atmosphere isn't what is purported to be today. The pressure, the atmospheric pressure on Mars' surface, in craters where the rovers are, is as high as the pressure right here where we are at this moment. The oxygen level is much thinner though. So people who've been on Mars, like Andrew Bjaga, William Whitecrow, others have testified to that fact. People whom I'm convinced have been there because of evidence like what I showed in our prior presentation. They say that it's like breathing at 14,000 or 15,000 foot altitude here on Earth. So the oxygen is thin, the breathing is laborious, it's uncomfortable, you wouldn't want to be an older person exposed to that without some sort of supplemental oxygen. But it can be done by a younger person for minutes to hours. And the temperature also during the daytime gets into the 70s Fahrenheit. So at night it gets much colder. But the point is a person can walk the surface of Mars just like this during the daytime in the right locations, particularly the deeper craters where the atmospheric pressure is higher. So, but again, I'm not saying this to tell you that that means there can be life on Mars. If there wasn't stuff all over our solar system where there is no atmosphere, I might be telling you that. But the fact is, these creatures have been hybridized in a way that a lot of them don't need an atmosphere, period, to live. Okay. Real age of our solar system, touched on that. All right, so here's one thing that has thrown people for a loop who've been looking at Mars. They're looking for bones. And now if you go on the internet and you search for bones on Mars, you will find some photos. But they're rare, and they're scattered, and NASA's ignoring them. Okay? It's not what usually you find for fossils on Mars. There's another kind of fossilization. It's called flash fossilization. It happens very, very fast, within hours to days. A creature can be completely fossilized. And what's needed to make it happen, what's unique about Mars versus Earth, although Earth has some of it, is perchlorates, a specific soil chemistry. So you need bacteria. There has to be microbial activity for the fossilization to occur. There has to be perchlorates for flash fossilization to occur, a high concentration of perchlorates and certain other chemicals. And then you've got to have water, of course, for it to occur. And generally the right temperatures. It's not going to happen in ice, normally. Okay? So Earth has perchlorates in its soil, generally not much. There are a few places on Earth where it's higher than in other places. There's a cave on Earth, and I forget the name of it, but I actually have it documented in the books, where you can go today, because they've got like clotheslines hung in the drips from that cave, outside of the cave. You can hang clothing items on that line, and the next day they're fossilized. Because perchlorates are dripping onto that with microbial activity, you actually get fossils in a day. And that's the rarity on Earth. I'm going to show you a creature from Earth that was flash fossilized here in a little while. But the point is, with a flash fossil, you don't get bones. What you get instead is a complete creature, preserved in stone. And depending on the amount of decay that's occurred since the fossilization, it's more or less recognizable. Far superior, generally, to bones. Unless it's highly decayed and it's just really hard to make out. Okay? So, flash fossilization on Earth, a rarity. We've hardly found any good samples of flash fossilized creatures. There are a few great ones. On Mars, it's the rule. Bones are the rarity on Mars. So it's completely flipped. So people don't understand that they need to be looking for things that actually look like creatures to find them on Mars. It's not pareidolia. I didn't say that right. Okay? That's not what it is. And it's going to be extremely obvious to you that that's not what it is as I get into this. Okay? That's from Earth. That's a nodosaur. N-O-D-O-S-A-U-R. That's a flash fossilized dinosaur from Earth. Look at the level of preservation. Okay? Pretty astonishing, right? Not bones. Inside of that thing, if they were to cut into it, they would find its organs preserved in the original structure in place.
Wow.
And in a good enough flash fossilized specimen, you actually find the structures of cells preserved, depending on how quickly the fossilization transpires. I want you to pay attention to a couple of things here. This is going to be important for later in the presentation, so make a mental note. Notice the appearance of the scales on this thing, okay? Do not forget that, please, okay? But on Mars, you're hardly ever going to see that because usually you only see heads, okay? But I still need you to make a note of that because I'm going to show you some mind-blowing scales on Mars, okay? Notice the head. If the head was the only thing you saw, if that was it, the rest of the creature was buried. And these are all the same fossil that you just saw, okay? Different angles. If this was the only thing you saw lying on the dirt in Mars, you know, on somewhere on the surface of Mars, you know, from a few meters away or, you know, a good distance with binoculars, whatever, a camera at a distance, would you recognize that as a creature or would you think it's a rock? No, what would you think it's a rock if you hadn't seen what I showed you before this? If you didn't know that those were all the head of that dinosaur that I just showed you, would you have a clue that you were looking at a fossil on Mars if this is the only thing you saw? And the rest of the creature's body was buried under the dirt. Would you know? So consider this too. Soil is looser on Mars. It's looser on the moon because the gravity is lower. Not only do creatures grow larger in lower gravity, the soil is looser. It's easier to maneuver in it. Okay? But the reason I want to point this out, and we'll come to this, pardon me, you need to consider the behavior of reptiles, insects, and amphibians on Earth. How they protect themselves from the elements, when they do it, how they protect themselves from predators, what their behavior is. If these creatures on Mars and elsewhere are hybrids, you know, their genes came from Earth, and they're hybrids of creatures that God created on Earth, okay? It's reasonable to expect that they would have comparable behaviors. And the environments are harsher elsewhere in our solar system. They do need to protect themselves to a degree from solar radiation, from cold, from other predators. It's a very barbaric place out there in our solar system compared to Earth. The environments are very barbaric. The creatures, their density, the kinds of creatures they are, very barbaric toward each other. So they need to protect themselves from fossils, or predators. Okay, but again, so bear in mind the head and the scales. All right, NASA rover, petrified wood on the surface of Mars. I'm going to show you this in color in a moment. Okay, I'm showing you this because I want you to see this is on Mars. The rover's there. Okay, you see that right there on top of the wood? That's alive. That's lichen. Okay, same photo. Why hasn't NASA told the world about this? If there were no other creatures on Mars, that piece of petrified wood, and there's other samples, by the way, of petrified wood, other photos, and then the lichen on top of it, that's life. Past or present, that's proof of complex biological life on Mars. Wood is complex. Lichens are complex. They're not just microbes. Okay? Why hasn't NASA mentioned that to the world? Again, they are not telling the truth. Pareidolia or paradenial, yes, I made up that word. And after today, it's going to go in the dictionary, I'm sure. Okay? So, pareidolia, and I know I'm not saying it right, so forgive me, is basically seeing an object that isn't there. You know, you imagine it in your head, you make it up in whatever you're looking at, right? You're seeing what you want to see. Paradenial is exactly the opposite. It's refusing to see an object that obviously is there, an unwillingness to admit it or recognize it. Okay? That is also a phenomenon. And people who are talking about pareidolia are not always being truthful. Sometimes they use that as a means of deflection, misdirection, to send you away from what you really are seeing, okay? But again, we need to have some pretty compelling evidence, don't we, to say that it's not pareidolia. I think that's pretty convincing. Okay? That's a fossil on Mars. But it's also evidence that their genes came from here. There's no possibility you'd have, if evolution were true, and again I'm saying it's not, there's no possibility you would have identical life forms on planets of completely different environments, you know, over however many years, developing. Okay? And how do you get a fossil like that walking the surface of Mars? That thing hasn't been excavated. That thing died suddenly, and it just fossilized standing. Okay? It takes an unimaginable catastrophe like Mars being struck to do something like that, where the atmosphere just gets sucked out along with water into space, or whatever, you know, huge heat, etc. Just some massive environmental change that shocked that thing dead while it was standing there. But also there had to be water. That thing was surrounded by water before it petrified. And bacteria. How many have heard of Gil Levin, the Viking lander biology experiments that were done in the past? So they had 3 instruments aboard the Viking landers to detect biological life, microbial life primarily. NASA, all the scientists at NASA were in agreement on what would be the data that would come back if it represented life. One of the 3 instruments is known to have been faulty. NASA knows that it was faulty and could never detect life. It's been used on Earth, and it couldn't detect life on Earth. The other 2 instruments came back positive for microbial activity on Mars immediately. So what did NASA do? Instead of admitting that, oh, we've got a faulty instrument, but the other 2 said there's life there, instead of doing that, they said, this 3rd instrument said, no, there's no life there, so there's no life on Mars. We have no evidence of microbial activity, right? They flat out lied. And in fact, that same instrument that failed to detect it on Mars literally has been taken here on Earth, tested on Earth, and couldn't detect life on Earth. Okay? Faulty. And NASA used it to lie. All right, remains from eating one another. What do they eat? So, reptiles, insects, primarily, but also some amphibians eat lichen, algae, okay, and each other, and other creatures. So, Mars has all kinds of algae, and you just saw lichen also on it. That's the coloration that you see in many cases in the soil. In Mars, it's algae. Yeah, there's lichen, okay? Primary food sources actually for reptiles, and some insects too. But they also eat each other. I'm going to show you a photo of, actually I'm going to show you at least 2 photos in this presentation of creatures being eaten or attacked. Okay, so I love this. I don't know if anybody's noticed it, but have you all noticed that NASA's last 3 rovers all look like bugs or creatures? And then they've got the neck-like protrusion, the legs, you know, in terms of the wheels. The body's a wing-like thing on one of the rovers, right, for the solar panels. They didn't have to be structured like that to function just as well as they do. Why did NASA choose a design that gives an appearance that could be interpreted as bug-like, you know, or weird to whatever would be on Mars' surface? Maybe scary, right? Are they trying to keep the rovers functioning is what I wonder. Okay, so I'm not showing the easy hominids. What do I mean by that? Like humanoid hominids? There are all kinds of photos, you know, out there on the internet, fake ones and some real ones, right? Of hominids coming in anti-gravity craft to visit Earth, claiming they created this, whatever. Their claims, they're all lies. You know, the best lie is a half-truth, right? So here's their half-truth. We're related. We've got genes in common. And here's the lie. We created it. Right? The opposite is true. Okay? So I'm going to show you the hard non-hominids, meaning the insectoids. I call them oids because some of them have obviously human characteristics. Some of them are obviously intelligent. Others look more like creatures from Earth. A lot of them look quite terrifying. A lot of them look really bizarre. And then some look like that very conventional iguana. Okay? So, these creatures, you know, when you talk about amphibians, insects, and reptiles on Earth, typically do burrow in the soil when it gets cold. They do so to protect themselves from predators. They do so to hibernate. When they die, sometimes like that, if they starve, they just lay there in the soil and desiccate, they fall apart. But in all those cases, the only thing you might see of the creature is its head, or just enough of it exposed for it to breathe, see, hear, and just enough to survive. Okay? Burrowing and hibernating life. So again, I'm pointing out we usually only see their heads. So this is part of the problem with Mars. You know, you're looking for all this life. You see all these rocks everywhere on the surface. And you think you're looking at rocks. And if you say they're not rocks, you're going to be accused of pareidolia, right? And that would be true on Earth most of the time. And it is true in places on Mars. But I'm going to show you that that's not the reality. Okay? So again, protecting themselves from the elements. Oh, this is an important point. You know, how do you distinguish a rock from a fossil? You know, you saw that notosaur. That would be a difficult to recognize fossil, even though it's a fantastic example, right? You'd have to notice the nostrils, the place for the mouth, right? The place for the eyes, the forehead. You know, facial-like features. You don't actually see that, particularly not good facial-like features, in rocks on Earth too often. In fact, you hardly ever do. Okay? But what happens if you're looking at photos of Mars and they're everywhere? Okay, when you start to look closely, you see depressions for eyes, depressions for nostrils, a slit or even an open mouth for a mouth, ears, you know, or places for ears. What do you do that when you're seeing that constantly everywhere? On the surface of Mars, popping out from the sides of hills on Mars. Okay? Is it pareidolia at that point? Well, that would be a pretty stupid and crazy argument, but it could be made and it might be true. Okay? But if you can show better examples, then no, it's not true. Okay, natural camouflage and blending. So, you get all... Okay, that's the reason it's a different color, though, is because that thing grew. You know, it's not just a totally weird, different kind of a rock next to another rock. It's actually a creature. It may be a fossil of a creature, but it's from a creature. All right, so notice this stuff up here on the ground. That right there is a giant head. Okay, there's the eye, the nose. Okay? This is a partially exposed giant head. But all next to it are others. Okay, there's the eye area. Okay? You know, all kinds of others. At a shallow, kind of an angle photograph. Not rocks. Okay, so I thought this was interesting, another head. You can see the kind of structure that you don't find in rocks. Another head, okay? More remains here. And more stuff in the foreground, like there's another creature's head right there. There's the eye, the nose, an angular head just ahead above the ground. Okay? All right, so I'll show you this quickly. This is right below the rover. These are remains right here, and here, and here. A paleontologist would look at this and recognize that that's a fossil. It's actually a really good fossil. There's no possibility that NASA missed this, okay? That those are fossils right there. They couldn't have just overlooked that. Oh, and let me just point those out right there too. A couple more heads next to each other. Small ones buried in the soil. This is why they couldn't miss it. Because it's right here. We're right in front of the rover. Okay? And by the way, I've got photos in the books of the rover driving over creatures' heads and then popping their heads up in disgust. Really. So, and those will be in the books. Multiple photos like that. So the rovers are literally driving over the heads of creatures in the soil, and they're not always dead. Okay, so let's move on to the next set of photos. Well, we've got a few minutes here. I'm going to move pretty quickly through this because I want to show you a couple of specific things in here. So this is a head, but mostly I just want you to see the pattern of it, okay? This pattern recurs in multiple heads, multiple fossils throughout this image, okay? And I'm just going to move pretty quickly through this stuff because there are just a few things that I have time to show you. Really blurry, terrible screen. Most of you probably can't recognize this unless you're like in the back of the room. But this is a head, and this is a head of two creatures right next to each other. On Mars, probably living creatures. Photographed at a great distance, unfortunately quite blurry. All right, so another fairly ornate head right here, fossil right there. Wanted to show you that one. Again, a lot of these are fairly blurry. Another head popping out right there. Okay, so this is one with its mouth open. Blurry, but you can tell. It's got its mouth open, popped up above the surface right there. You can see the shadows from the eyes, the neck. Okay, another one right there popped up, kind of like a cobra almost. But more fossils all around here that I'm pointing to. These are the eyes for another creature. It's a fossil right here, this one. So I told you on the sides of hills we often see these things sticking their heads out, right? And some of them are big and angular and really bizarre. Nostrils, mouth, rounded head. Rounded nostrils, mouth. More angular, triangular right there, rectangular down here. This is the upper and lower jaw. Same thing here. You notice I told you to note the pattern of what you just saw? This is another head with a totally different kind of pattern. This is like a crustacean almost kind of a pattern for the head, right there. Blurry, but everything that I'm pointing to is actually a fossil. Most of them hard to make out, but I wanted you to see the pattern here. Try finding rocks like that on Earth that are symmetrical and spaced apart from one another enough to squeeze in as creatures that have nostril depressions and that kind of thing. This is another head where you can see more of it. There's the nose, the eye area, the mouth. Poor photo, but again, an example. I want to move past some of these. I want to get some other stuff. So.
And those were then exterminated or killed at the same time?
Yeah, the ones that are fossils mostly were, but again, there's ongoing life on Mars.
Yeah, those were all very similarly patterned.
Yeah, those ones that you were just looking at.
Yeah.
But this looks a little more like a squid on the surface. There's the eye area, okay, right here. There's the mouth right there. Hard to make out, but again, a fossil. Not a rock. Another one that's got the pattern that I was pointing out, but there's the head right there. Another head. So, there's lots of stuff like this. I'm going to show you one more thing here, and then I want to show you a much better photo. If I can get to it. Yeah. But again, all kinds of incredible stuff like that. Or that. Yeah, there are teeth actually in some of these. They're exposed like, So I'm going to look at these down here while I go through and get to one that I want to show you. Okay, well that's, again, a fossil sticking out from the side, the nose of a creature. Okay, so this one has some teeth that are visible right there. Okay, off of an angular head.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
I don't want to go for it.
You do at times get much better photos than that of teeth, but I thought that one was interesting. So these are remains mostly. Right here. Okay. So you can kind of just look at the arrows here, and I'm just going to zip through some of these until I get to the one that I want to show you. Okay, so this is one that I do want to show you. Notice this one right here? I think that's a pretty good head. Popped out the side. This, I don't know if it's living or not, but it might be. Again, it's from a long distance, it's blurry, but what you're seeing is part of the creature right here behind other rocks. There's the nose, the mouth area, the ears, the neck. Yeah, kind of. But possibly alive, and that's why I pointed out, same thing here, different kind of creature. All right, so let me just quickly get to
How many photos of Mars would you say you've analyzed since you started?
tens of thousands. Okay, another fossil. Another fossil, kind of like a Tyrannosaurus head almost, but fossilized. And by the way, I do have good Tyrannosaurus type heads on Mars, better than that. More creatures, maybe alive, but probably a fossil. Right. So again, that head pattern I told you to notice, right there, another fossilized or living head. I don't know what someone ever did.
What makes you decide if it's alive or dead?
Well, this one is obviously dead. For example, its legs are melted into the soil. Okay, this is what I wanted to show you. A substantially exposed creature right there. There's the head, the eyes, the open mouth. Okay, the back kind of has a hump on it. Legs that are fossilized in the soil, but also another head right there. Legs. Another head. I think that's an interesting fossil. Obviously not a rock. Okay, so I'm going to take a minute here, forgive me, to look up something different that I want to show you that's a much better fossil. All right, this is a NASA image. It's raw. It hasn't been edited, cropped, enlarged, or anything else. Now, you think you're looking at a bunch of rocks there, right?
I don't believe anything anymore.
Smart lady. All right. So, in this one photo, every XY coordinate pair you see there is a fossil or a living creature's head. There are hundreds in the photo I just showed you. I'm going to give you a couple of examples like those two up at the top that I said I want to show. There are actually others I didn't get to. I was going to spend time organizing this. Maybe I'll have that done for tomorrow. Or I'll show you more from this image. This is a fantastic image. So 366X, 577Y. Let me show you how we use that with Irfan view. So this is the image. Okay. You'll notice right here, the program is showing me the XY coordinate pair.
Yeah.
Wherever my mouse is in the image. That pair stays stable in this program no matter how I enlarge the software. So the coordinate that I want is 366, 577. So I'm going to maneuver the mouse to that area.
Well, you're very close.
I got to get 366, 577. Okay, so right about there. And a little bit. So
365.
yeah, but these things get really close. So again, this image has a lot of warps. It's not cleaned up at all. But, I need to go to the exact coordinates so I can even see what I'm trying to point out to you. Oh yeah, right there. Okay, great. So you see where the mouse is?
Yeah.
That right there, if you can see it in a good screen, is a well-defined head. And these lines that you're seeing are because I've blown it up in this program. When I enlarge it more professionally, later, you won't see that. You'll see the image without those artifacts. But you'll notice there's color coordination here. And there's the nose, the eye area. This is the mouth of another creature. You can see the teeth.
Oh, wow.
Right off of it. Fused heads.
Like a big lion.
Yeah, they're fused together, two fossils, okay?
Wow.
Let me show you another example. So I'm going to go to 124,973. Let me make this fit. Okay, 124,973. So the book is going to have XY coordinate pairs, excuse me, like this, so that you can find things. Notice that, okay? Let me make it a little smaller, so because that's a terrible screen. All right. Okay, look at it a little smaller. Do you guys see that this is obviously not a rock? Eye, nose, forehead, another creature right there. Okay. A head-shaped rock? No, it's a fossil. Okay, with another one right behind it. They're all over in here, and there are actually some that are alive in here that are better to find than I just showed you. There are hundreds, like I said. Are we out of time? Okay. So that's it, folks. Scratch the surface. And there's stuff like this all over the solar system. The book will have more and better.
Awesome.